Sometimes the very same people who once walked away, who turned their backs without a second glance, somehow find their way back to you months, sometimes years later. And when they do, you might be tempted to think it's fate, or timing, or growth. But the truth is far more revealing. They're not returning because you've waited. They're returning because you didn't. This video is not about blame, nor revenge. It's about understanding why rejection doesn't always last, why silence echoes louder than words, and why becoming better, truly better, is more attractive than any plea for attention. This isn't about getting someone back. It's about rising so high they have no choice but to look up and wonder what they lost. If you've ever been rejected, misunderstood, or overlooked, this one is for you. Stay through the end, and you'll learn not only why they come back, but how to make peace with the fact that you've outgrown the need for their return. And if this message resonates with you, if you felt the quiet shift of power when someone who left suddenly circles back, then consider subscribing to this channel. It tells me that you're ready to stop chasing and start becoming. Chapter 1. They rethink their choice. It begins quietly. They don't announce it. There's no cinematic realization, no swelling music, as they drop their phone and whisper your name into the night. It's much slower, more subtle, and much more human. At first, it's just a thought. A flicker in the dark. Maybe it's when they scroll past a photo, or when they see someone who vaguely resembles you, and their heart stumbles for a beat. Maybe it's when their new situation doesn't quite feel like what they expected, and your absence suddenly speaks louder than your presence ever did. They rethink, not because they wanted to, but because life forces them to compare. You see, rejection often comes from a place of overconfidence. They believed the grass was greener. They believed you were stable, available, present, perhaps even too present. They thought you'd always be there, that you'd wait, that they could leave and return when the timing was better, or when they were ready to feel again. But you didn't wait. You transformed, and it is precisely that unexpected reality, your strength, your forward motion, that starts shaking their certainty. Their mind begins to spiral into what-ifs. What if they misjudged you? What if you were better than they gave you credit for? What if no one else makes them feel quite the same? They may not reach out yet. In fact, most won't. Not immediately. But the seed is planted. And the ego, the same ego that once told them they were right to leave, now begins to whisper doubts. That's the thing about ego. It always wants to win. So when it sees you thriving, evolving, glowing, it starts to panic. Not because it wants you happy, but because it cannot stand the idea that it might have made a mistake. Reconsideration is rarely about romance at first. It's about comparison. You become the yardstick by which others are measured, and when those others fail to hold up, as they often do, the mind returns to what once was. They start telling themselves stories. Stories that justify their return. That maybe you were just both too young. That maybe it was bad timing. That maybe you've both grown and matured. And the stars have realigned. But deep down, they know. They know it's not about time or fate. It's about regret. A quiet, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, they walked away from something rare. And when that thought settles in, when the first crack appears in their certainty, it doesn't go away. It grows. Every social media post you make, every win you share, every time you shine without them, it feeds the doubt. Here's what's important to understand. Their doubt doesn't mean you were wrong for how you felt, or that they were cruel. It simply means they're human. And humans often fail to see value until it's beyond reach. You might think they forgot you. But the truth is, some memories don't fade. They just lie dormant, waiting to be reawakened by a quiet trigger, a moment of weakness, a pang of nostalgia, or the unmistakable absence of a connection that once felt effortless. So when they rethink their choice, they're not just remembering you. They're remembering who they were with you. And often, that person felt more alive, more grounded, more seen. Here's where it gets powerful. Your growth doesn't just make you more attractive. It makes their past decisions feel foolish. And people hate feeling foolish. So instead of apologizing directly, they might test the waters, a reaction to your story, a subtle like, a vague message. Because admitting they were wrong would mean admitting they lost something valuable. And pride, for many, is a louder voice than love. Now, pause for a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself this. If someone has to lose you to see your value, did they really deserve you in the first place? Let's reflect on that. If you've ever had someone return after turning their back on you, I want you to share. When did you first realize the power had shifted? Was it their silence, your success, or something else entirely? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the mirror someone else needs. Chapter 2. Your silence resonates. Silence is underestimated. We live in a world that screams. A world of alerts, pings, instant replies, and dopamine hits. So when someone says nothing, truly nothing, it rattles the soul in ways noise never could. After they reject you, they often expect a reaction. They anticipate heartbreak. They brace for the messages, the questions, the attempts to fix what has just been broken. But when you say nothing, when you resist the urge to explain, to chase, to beg, something strange happens. Your silence becomes louder than their certainty. At first, they might tell themselves you're just playing games, that you're hurt, that the silence is a temporary wall meant to punish or provoke. But then days pass, then weeks, and there you are, living, growing, radiating, without them. And that's when the silence turns into a mirror. It shows them something they weren't ready to see, that your world didn't collapse when they walked away, that perhaps they were a chapter, not the story. And in their mind, that makes no sense, because they believed they had the power to define the narrative. Your silence strips that power away. Here's the paradox of human desire. We want what we cannot reach, and we question what doesn't need us. By staying silent, you project wholeness. You don't say, "I'm fine." You don't need to. You show it. And that image, that confident stillness, disturbs the very foundation of their ego. They wonder, were you ever that attached? Were your feelings real? Did you move on that easily? The silence forces them into introspection. They start remembering the good moments, replaying conversations, searching for clues they might have missed, and because the brain craves resolution, they spiral into obsession. Silence doesn't just protect your dignity, it creates mystery. And mystery, when paired with self-respect, is magnetic. You see, there's something ancient and powerful about a person who does not explain themselves. The Stoics knew this well. Dignity is not found in declarations, but in restraint. When you don't react, you show that your peace is not up for negotiation, that your emotional state is not dictated by someone else's choices. This is the essence of power, calm, quiet strength. They may not admit it out loud, but your silence confronts their own noise. And while they might distract themselves, dating others, posting more, seeking validation, it's all just a way to drown out the echo of your absence. And when all that noise fades, when the nights are long and the phone is still, it's your silence that lingers. Let me be clear, silence is not manipulation. It's not the cold shoulder. It's not a tactic to get them back. It's a statement, a way of saying, I know my worth, and I refuse to argue for it. There is nothing more haunting to someone who expected chaos than your composure, and the longer you remain silent, the more powerful your memory becomes. You stop being the person they left. You become the one that got away. Not because you begged for attention, but because you didn't need it. So if you're in that space now, if someone recently left and you're resisting the urge to reach out, trust in your silence. It's doing more than you think. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent after someone rejected you? What happened when you did? Did they come back? Did they try to reopen the door they closed? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's give voice to the quiet strength we often forget we possess. Chapter 3. Your success draws eyes. They say success is the best revenge. But when it comes to rejection, success is more than that. It becomes the mirror they cannot look away from. Not because it hurts them, but because it humbles them. After someone leaves you, especially when they think they're trading up, they expect to glance back and see you struggling. That's the quiet expectation. That you'll falter, that you'll dwell, that you'll carry their absence like a wound that refuses to close. But when instead you rise, when you thrive, transform, grow, and elevate without any trace of bitterness, it forces them to reevaluate everything they believed about you. Your success, in whatever form it takes, becomes undeniable. Maybe it's external, a new project, a physical transformation, a burst of confidence in how you walk, speak, and show up in the world. Or maybe it's more internal, a peace, a steadiness, a glow that can't be faked or fabricated. Either way, it's noticeable. And even if they don't reach out, they see it, they feel it. And whether they admit it or not, it stings. Why? Because success is proof. Proof that their presence was never your fuel. That their validation was never your anchor. That the best parts of you didn't need them to flourish. Only time, direction, and self-belief. And this realization, it doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in. Perhaps they see your photo, smiling brighter than before. Or maybe a mutual friend mentions your name in passing, accompanied by something like, "They're really doing well these days." Sometimes it's just energy, the way you carry yourself, unbothered, unfazed. That kind of strength has gravity, and gravity pulls. But here's where it goes deeper. It's not just that you're successful, it's that you didn't announce it. You didn't parade it. You didn't try to rub it in. Your quiet climb says more than any shouted victory. Because those who are truly evolving rarely feel the need to prove it. And that humility, that inward confidence, is disarming. People notice when you no longer try to be seen. They begin to wonder, were you always this strong, this attractive, this focused? And if so, how did they miss it? And if not, how did you grow so quickly? It makes them question their own growth, their own choices, their own timing. What they believed was a conclusion begins to feel like a premature ending. And the more you shine, the more they wrestle with the possibility that they misunderstood you. This internal conflict leads to curiosity. Curiosity becomes envy. And envy, when softened by nostalgia, turns into longing. That's when the messages start. The casual check-ins. The "hey, just saw this and thought of you." It's rarely direct, rarely honest. But you'll know, they're not reaching out because they want to celebrate you. They're reaching out because your glow reminds them of their own dimming. And that is not your fault, nor your responsibility. It's simply the way humans work. We are drawn to what feels grounded, and someone who has rejected you in the past, especially if they did so believing they were above you, will now find themselves drawn to your altitude, because it proves what they failed to recognize when it mattered. But you must ask yourself, are they returning for you, or for the idea of you they now envy? Success is a double-edged sword. It attracts, but not all attraction is sincere. Some are seeking proximity to your peace. Others want to share your light, not because they love you, but because they hope it will make them feel whole. This is where your wisdom must rise. You didn't grow just to welcome back the very energy that once doubted your worth. You didn't evolve just to offer yourself to someone who couldn't see you clearly when you stood in front of them. You grew for you, and that alone is the victory. Now take a moment to reflect. Think back to a time when someone who once dismissed you came back, drawn to the very things they once overlooked. How did you handle it? What changed in you that made them notice? If you feel called to share, leave your story below. Your words might help someone else understand the quiet power of rising without bitterness. Chapter 4. You've evolved beyond. It's a strange feeling, the realization that the person you once yearned for no longer fits within the life you've built. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with stillness, a moment of calm where you look back at the version of you who once needed them, and you barely recognize yourself. That's evolution. After rejection, many instinctively ask, "What's wrong with me?" But those who walk the Stoic path, who choose self-mastery over self-pity, ask a different question. Who must I become? And that question leads to change. Not the desperate, performative kind, but the deep, quiet, patient kind. The kind that reshapes your patterns, your thoughts, your values. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Over time, this process builds someone new, someone who no longer seeks to be saved, because they've learned to save themselves. Someone who doesn't beg to be seen, because they've learned to see themselves clearly. And that new version of you, they're not interested in reuniting with the person who left the old version behind. Here lies the paradox. The very growth that makes you attractive to those who once rejected you also makes you uninterested in their return. Why? Because you've tasted self-respect. You've lived in the solitude of your own making and found it nourishing. You've built boundaries not as walls, but as sacred gates. You've clarified what you will and will not allow, not out of spite, but from self-awareness. And when they come back, not all, but some, they're not meeting the same person they walked away from. They're meeting someone evolved. Someone whose peace no longer depends on being accepted. Someone who no longer trades dignity for closeness. It's not that you hate them. In fact, true growth comes with compassion. You understand why they left. You understand your own flaws, your own past behaviors, your own blind spots. But you also understand this: evolution is not a circle, it's a spiral. And you are not where you were before. They may speak of closure, of reconnection, of reigniting something that once was. But to you, it feels foreign. You've outgrown the old rhythm, the old conversations, the old dynamics. You see the patterns now. You see how you dimmed your light back then to make them feel comfortable, how you stayed quiet when you should have spoken, how you compromised just to keep the peace, and how it cost you your own. And so, their return feels less like a triumph and more like a test of your progress, a reminder of how far you've come. Because once upon a time, the mere thought of them reaching out would have shaken you. Now, you respond with grace, or perhaps not at all. This is your power. They may say you've changed, and they're right. But what they don't always understand is that this change wasn't for them. It was for you, for your future, for yours. And it's in this moment, when you calmly say no, or don't respond, or simply feel no desire to reconnect, that your evolution is complete. Because now your decisions are based on alignment, not loneliness, on worth, not wounds. If you've ever looked back and realized you no longer want what once consumed your thoughts, then you know this feeling, and I invite you to share it. What shifted in you that made their return feel irrelevant? When did you know you'd evolved beyond them? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear the strength in your story. Chapter 5. They fear losing you. Rejection doesn't always feel like loss, at least not at first. To the one doing the rejecting, it often feels like control, like clarity, like freedom. But time, as it always does, reveals deeper truths. And in time, what once felt like liberation begins to feel like something else entirely. Uncertainty. They may have walked away, believing they were making the right decision. That someone better, easier, or more exciting was waiting just around the corner. But slowly, reality sinks in. Not all replacements offer the same depth. Not all comfort feels like connection. And not all attraction equals compatibility. And then, the fear creeps in. It's not always loud. Often, it arrives as an unease, a late-night thought, a quiet question. What if they move on for real? What if they find someone who sees them? What if I was wrong? And here's where the dynamic shifts. They don't fear that you're gone. They fear that they've lost the version of you that once loved them. The version that would have waited, that would have forgiven, that would have come back without hesitation. But that version no longer exists. And so their fear deepens, because they sense that you are no longer within reach, that you've stepped into a different season of your life, one where their approval no longer holds weight. One where their attention no longer feels like oxygen. You see, the ultimate fear is not rejection. It's irrelevance. And when someone realizes that they are no longer the central character in your inner world, it stings in a way they never prepared for. Because while they chose to leave, they never expected to be left behind. Fear grows in the gaps of silence and progress. The longer you go without reaching out, the stronger that fear becomes. The more you thrive, publicly or privately, the more they feel the urgency to reinsert themselves into your story. This is when the messages come, sometimes direct, sometimes disguised, a sudden interest in your life, a compliment, a memory shared. All subtle signals, attempting to reopen a door that now feels closed. And here lies your choice. You can acknowledge their fear. You can offer kindness, clarity, even closure. But you must not shrink to ease their discomfort. Because your path forward is not about softening your shine to soothe the anxiety of someone who doubted you. It's about continuing grounded, whole, and unapologetically clear about what you now require. Their fear is not your burden, but it is a sign that you've become someone impossible to replace. Someone whose worth no longer needs proving. Someone whose presence was never the problem, only their perception of it. So let them fear, let them wonder, let them sit with the silence they once created. Because in that silence, they'll finally hear the truth. They didn't lose you when they walked away. They lost you when they thought you'd wait. Let that sink in. Have you ever seen this fear in someone's eyes? The moment they realize they might have truly lost you. How did it feel? How did you respond? If you've lived through that moment, share it in the comments. Your reflection might be the closure someone else is searching for. Chapter 6. Regret haunts their mind. Regret rarely arrives at the moment of departure. It shows up quietly, long after the door has closed. For the one who walked away, the early days often feel affirming. There's a sense of relief, of control, of finality. They tell themselves they made the right decision, perhaps even that they were brave for it. And in that self-narrative, they feel powerful, justified, free. But time has a way of peeling back illusions. Days pass, then weeks, then months. The noise fades, the distractions dry up. The temporary connections begin to feel empty, repetitive, shallow, and beneath the surface, something stirs. It begins with a whisper. What if I was wrong? At first, they resist it. Pride digs in its heels. The mind begins to rewrite history to preserve its ego. They remind themselves of your flaws. They focus on your mistakes. They magnify the tension and downplay the depth. Because if they truly admit that you were good to them, perhaps better than they deserved, then they must confront the weight of what they left behind. But memory has its own agenda. It returns uninvited, in moments of stillness. A laugh, a look, a phrase you used to say. And suddenly regret is no longer abstract. It's visceral. It lives in the gut. It colors their mornings and shadows their nights. You must understand this. Regret doesn't always look like sadness. Often it wears the mask of anger, sarcasm, avoidance, or sudden interest. Because admitting regret, true regret, requires humility. It forces a person to say, I chose wrong. I let go of something rare. And most aren't ready for that kind of truth. So instead, they hover. They circle back with vague messages, half-truths, cryptic interactions. They might react to your posts. They might comment on something old. They might bring up a memory not to reconnect, but to feel close to what they once had. And every time you don't reply, or reply with grace but distance, their regret deepens. Here's the truth many don't want to accept. Regret is not about missing you. It's about missing who they were around you. Maybe with you they felt safe, seen, inspired. Maybe they laughed more, dreamed bigger, rested easier. And now, in your absence, they feel hollow. Not because you took something from them, but because you brought something out of them that they've since lost. That's the sting. Not just that they're alone, but that they don't recognize themselves anymore. And if you've done the work, if you've healed, grown, and risen from that experience, your presence becomes salt in the wound of their regret. You're not just a person they miss. You're a reflection of the person they failed to become. That's the cruelty of hindsight. It offers clarity only when the opportunity is no longer available. But what do you do with this? How do you hold space for the knowledge that someone regrets losing you, without letting it anchor you to the past? You choose grace, not for them, but for yourself. You acknowledge the regret, but you don't absorb it. You allow their sorrow, but you don't become its cure. You let them sit with the consequences of their choice, not out of punishment, but out of respect for your own evolution. Because here's what's sacred. You're not the same person they rejected. And if they want to return, they must confront not only who you are now, but who they must become to walk beside you again. Some will, most won't. And that's okay. Regret, after all, is a teacher. For them, for you, for anyone who has ever confused comfort with compatibility or timing with truth. So now, take a moment. Think of someone who once let you go, only to circle back with the eyes of a person haunted by what they lost. What did that regret look like? What did it teach you about your own worth? If you feel called, share your story below. Your words may be the healing someone else needs to move on with dignity. Chapter 7. You're a new challenge. Familiarity breeds comfort, but it also breeds blindness. In the early days before rejection, before walking away, they saw you as safe, predictable, available. They mistook your openness for need, your care for dependence, your loyalty for complacency. You were known, and because you were known, you were taken for granted. But rejection changes everything, not just for you, but for them. As time passes, they begin to notice something unsettling. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer the person who would drop everything to answer. You are no longer easy to read, easy to access, easy to impress. You've become different. Sharper, calmer, more confident, less available. And that transformation reframes everything. Suddenly, you are not the comfort they remember. You are a challenge, a mystery, a puzzle they no longer know how to solve. This shift does something strange to the human mind, especially for those used to feeling in control. It awakens curiosity. It ignites competitiveness, and yes, sometimes even desire, because we are wired to pursue what we do not fully understand. We chase what feels just out of reach. And now, that's you. You see, rejection gave you space to become someone who no longer rushes to reply, who no longer spills their heart to be heard, who no longer lets validation dictate value. And this makes you magnetic. You've mastered the art of stillness, of presence, of discernment. And when someone who once dismissed you sees that, they don't just notice, they react. They want back in. But it's no longer a reunion. It's a chase. You've become the high ground. And to stand beside you again, they know, consciously or not, they would have to climb. But here's where it gets delicate. Some return, not to reconnect, but to reclaim. Not because they admire your evolution, but because they fear being left behind by it. To them, your growth feels like a challenge to their ego. A sign that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. And instead of honoring that growth, they try to conquer it. To see if they still have influence. To test if your independence is real, or if it's just a performance. They'll flirt, compliment, tease, sometimes even apologize. But beneath the surface, it's not always about you. It's about them, about their need to prove they still matter, that they can still affect you. This is where your inner strength must be clearest. Because not all who chase you now deserve access to who you've become. Not all interest is rooted in respect. Not all attention is affection. Some people are drawn to your progress only because they fear their own stagnation, and reconnecting with you feels like relevance. So you must ask yourself, not do they want me back, but do they even know who I am now? Because the you they left is gone. And if they're returning with the same eyes, the same mindset, the same old language, they're not chasing you. They're chasing a memory. Let them chase. Let them circle. Let them wrestle with your absence. But don't let their curiosity drag you back into old patterns. You're not here to be figured out. You're here to be met, soul to soul, by someone who has also grown. If you've ever had someone return not with humility but with the energy of conquest, how did you respond? What did you learn about the difference between admiration and possession? If you have a story, drop it in the comments. Your reflection might help someone discern whether what's returning is genuine or just a test of their resolve. Chapter 8. They see no better option. There's a moment, a quiet, sobering moment, when they look around and realize no one else measures up. It doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, over the course of many new conversations, brief infatuations, and unmet expectations. They search for the same spark, the same safety, the same depth, but it remains elusive. They thought moving on would be easy, that they could replicate what they had, that someone else would quickly fill your space. But connection, true connection, is not copy-paste. It is rare. It is delicate. And when it's gone, its absence becomes a ghost that follows every shallow interaction. Eventually, they start seeing the difference. The way others don't listen like you did. The way laughs feel forced. The way vulnerability is met with judgment instead of grace. The way no one else speaks their emotional language the way you once did. And it dawns on them. Not all people bring peace. Not all attention is healing. Not all warmth is genuine. They begin to measure new people by your standard. And that standard is high. Not because you were perfect, you weren't. But because you were real. You were invested. You cared when it wasn't convenient. You stayed present when it got messy. And you saw them, truly saw them, in ways they hadn't experienced before. And now, they crave that. Not you necessarily, but the feeling you gave them. The version of themselves they became in your presence. They scroll through apps, meet for drinks, flirt at parties, but something's missing. And each time they're reminded of what they had and lost. That's when the realization strikes. Maybe they left something they shouldn't have. Maybe the options they thought they had weren't as vibrant as they imagined. Maybe the fantasy of something better was just that, a fantasy. And here's the catch. This isn't about idealizing you. It's about confronting their own misjudgment. About realizing that availability is not compatibility. That novelty does not guarantee intimacy. That attention is not affection. So now they look back. And you, in your stillness, your self-assurance, your evolved glow, you become the benchmark. They may reach out under the guise of nostalgia, or curiosity, or just checking in, but underneath, they are hoping to feel what they once felt, to reclaim the emotional high they experienced in your presence. But something has changed. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer wishing. You've seen the cost of trying to convince someone to stay. And you refuse to pay that price again. You've become your own home. So when they come back, eyes searching, voice softened by hindsight, asking if maybe there's still something left. You smile. Not because you're bitter, but because you've learned. Being someone's best option is not the same as being someone's only option. And you, now, are full of options. Not in people, but in peace, in possibility, in purpose. Ask yourself this: would you take someone back if you knew they only returned because no one else compared? Would that be love or settling? If you've ever sensed that someone returned to you simply because no one else measured up, I invite you to share what that moment felt like. What you chose, what you learned. Let's continue the reflection below. Chapter 9. Your calm pulls them back. There's a certain weight to calm, not the kind that is forced, brittle, or masked with false indifference, but the genuine calm that comes from someone who has done the work, someone who has sat with their pain, turned it over, understood it, and released it. That kind of calm has gravity. When someone who once rejected you returns, what they notice first isn't always your appearance, your success, or even your achievements. What often catches them off guard is your stillness. You are no longer reactive, no longer trying to explain your worth. You don't flinch when they enter the room. You don't rush to fill the silence. You simply are. And that unsettles them, not because you're cold, but because you are at peace in a way they no longer recognize. You are not performing for attention. You are not proving anything. You are living, centered, rooted, and in a world where everyone is shouting, grasping, competing for validation. Your quiet presence becomes thunder. They feel it instantly. It's in the way you hold eye contact. Steady, unbothered. It's in the pauses between your words. It's in your willingness to leave things unsaid because not everything requires explanation. You no longer chase closure because you've made peace with what happened. You no longer need answers because you've outgrown the questions. This calm does something curious to them. It makes them reflect, not just on who you've become, but on who they were when they had you. And who they were in hindsight was often restless, anxious, easily overwhelmed. They mistook your steady love for lack of passion, your patience for lack of spark. But now they understand. Or at least, they begin to. They see that what you offered was rare, a presence that asked for nothing, yet gave everything. And now, in contrast to the noise they've since encountered, your quiet becomes a song they can't get out of their head. Calm energy is seductive, not because it chases, but because it invites. It does not beg for attention. It attracts it. And what's more, it sets the terms. It says, if you wish to be near me, match my peace, or leave me be. This is why your calm pulls them back. Because they miss how they felt around you, how their nervous system settled, how their chaos softened. They long for the feeling of being understood without having to explain, of being accepted without having to perform. But now that space around you is sacred, no longer open to all. You've learned the value of guarding your peace, not out of fear, but out of deep self-respect. You have boundaries now. Standards. You no longer tolerate emotional turbulence disguised as chemistry. And so, they return, hesitantly, testing the waters, hoping for a window into your world. Only to realize, the doors don't open like they used to. They need to knock now, to wait, to grow. And some will, others won't. But that is no longer your concern. You are not a refuge for the unready. You are not here to stabilize someone who only values your calm when their life is spinning. You are here to share that calm with someone who has found their own. If someone from your past came back, not because they missed you, but because they missed how they felt around you, how did you respond? Did you open the door, or did you protect the quiet you worked so hard to earn? Share your reflections in the comments. Sometimes your calm voice is exactly what someone else needs to hear. Chapter 10. They test your resolve. They always return differently. Some come back humble. Others come back hesitant. But most, consciously or not, come back to test you. Not out of cruelty, and often not even out of arrogance, but out of curiosity. They want to know if the story they told themselves still holds true. If the power they once held still lingers in the air between you. They remember the version of you that bent, the one who forgave quickly, who hoped too hard, who waited too long. And now that they see your growth, your distance, your peace, your clarity, they wonder, is it real? Or is it a performance? So they test. They might joke about the past, lightly prodding to see if you still flinch. They might ask probing questions, curious to see if your tone still carries longing. Or they may pretend nothing ever happened, expecting you to pick up where you left off, as if your healing was just a placeholder for their return. This is where the final chapter of your transformation is written. Not in words, but in behavior, because your resolve is everything. It's one thing to grow in silence. It's another to stand in your strength when the very person who once weakened you walks back into view. And here's what they don't expect. You're no longer negotiating. You're not angry. You're not cold. But you are different. Clear. Steady. You no longer speak in maybes. You no longer accept breadcrumbs and call it love. You are not interested in going backwards, even if the past was once beautiful. They'll notice this quickly. The new tone in your voice, the lack of urgency, the fact that you don't rush to reassure them or fill the silence. You are no longer performing. You are evaluating. And that shift, that refusal to abandon yourself again, is the ultimate testament to your growth. But the test may intensify. Some will try to recreate old dynamics. They'll act like nothing happened. Or they'll offer vague apologies, hoping your emotions will fill in the blanks. Some will try to reawaken your empathy, telling you about their pain, their regrets, their confusion. And while compassion is noble, you've learned that empathy without boundaries is self-betrayal. You can care without re-entering the cage. This is the moment where many falter. The desire to reconnect, to feel chosen, to rewrite the past. It's powerful, but you must remember, your strength isn't shown by how well you resist them. It's revealed in how deeply you remain loyal to your new self. Your resolve is not about punishment. It's about protection. You're not holding a grudge. You're holding a standard. And when you pass this final test, when you maintain your center without spite or superiority, you reach a new kind of peace. The kind that no longer needs closure. The kind that doesn't require understanding. The kind that trusts that what is meant for you will never require self-abandonment. This is the victory. Not the fact that they returned, but that you no longer need them to. Now, breathe. Have you ever had someone test your growth? Expecting the old version of you to reappear? What did you do when they tried to recreate the past? Tell your story in the comments. There's someone watching this who needs to know they're not alone in choosing themselves. Conclusion. They return, not because you begged or pleaded or waited in silence. They return because the person they left behind no longer exists. You didn't chase them. You chose yourself. And in that decision, the one where you turned your gaze inward, rebuilt your strength, quieted your heart, and refused to lower your standards, you became someone unforgettable. That's what pulls them back. But the question is no longer why they return. The question is whether they deserve a place in the life you've built in their absence. You've outgrown the version of love that required you to prove your worth. You've risen beyond the need for validation from those who could not see your value when it mattered. Now, you offer your presence from fullness, not from lack, from clarity, not from desperation. You are not here to be rechosen. You are here to choose, and that is your power. If this message resonated with you, if you felt seen in any part of this journey, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. These reflections are for you and for anyone walking the quiet road of growth, dignity, and emotional strength. And if you made it to the end, let me know you're one of the few who walk this path with integrity. Comment below with the phrase, "I didn't wait, I evolved." Let it echo for others to see. Because sometimes the ones who return don't deserve the one who rose.